Hi, Amos here. When I was in Tokyo recently at the last Fuji Avic Headphone Festival, my friends asked me, have you heard the Aurender Flow yet? And my answer was, well, who is Aurender and what is the Flow? And the answer, of course, is this thing here in the box. Originally called the V1000, it is listed as a portable DAC and headphone amplifier for audiophiles. And it comes with quite an attractive case, which is very handy for taking it places. Although, of course, it doesn't have any places to plug in the devices through the case. It's just a carrying case. It is actually quite big and chunky and quite heavy. On the limits of portable, I mean, if you see the USB 3 mini port there, you'll get an idea of how big and chunky it really is, especially the headphone jack. I mean, it's portable in the sense that it's got a battery inside mainly. And inside the box, you get, well, quite a lot of accessories. You, of course, have a USB 3 cable, which is necessary for transferring music to and from the inbuilt SSD if it's included. And you have, if you want to, it doesn't have line out jacks. If you want to do line out, you have to use this or some equivalent, a headphone socket to RCA adapter. What looks like a good quality optical cable. Of course, I've already opened this and given it a go. An OTG cable, on-the-go cable for Android devices. I'm leaving the big one thing to last deliberately. A power brick, very Apple, almost Apple-like, but more sensibly with a nice fold-out plug. Of course, a 6.5 to 3.5 adapter, necessary again. And last but not least, I've never seen this included in a device for a very, very long time. What's this, you say? It is a screwdriver. Yes, it is a standard Phillips screwdriver, and the reason for that is fairly straightforward. The Aurender Flow optionally comes with a built-in SSD, which, depending on the device, can be accessed by the computer and play back music at the same time. It doesn't work on iOS devices in that regard, but you can use it as music storage, essentially. It takes basically the Samsung SSDs, the inside, but to put the SSD in, of course, you need to 1, 2, 3, 4, remove 4 screws. So here's the unit itself. It's a rather simple thing. I mean, all it's got on one end is a headphone socket, a 6.3mm or 1/4 inch, buttons on the side for controlling media or accessing the functions, and a USB 3 port and optical input on the back. And that's really all there is to it. Quite simple and straightforward. And it is that simple to use. There is no power button. I mean, all you do to power, I mean, there is a power button, but to power it on, what you do is you plug in your computer or smartphone thus, and you'll see the display come up. There you go, Flow. And then all you have to do is plug your headphones in, and then you just turn up the volume as necessary. Goes up from 120 dBs, and play music and listen away. And if you plug into a computer and the computer switches off or you unplug it, then it just switches off by itself. And so you can just leave it connected to a computer. So the question then comes up, well, what happens if it'll charge when it's not playing music automatically? So you don't have to worry usually about it running out of charge unless you listen very, very continuously all day. So in that case, if you plug it into an iDevice, the iDevice will say, hey, it's drawing too much power, so how do I use it for that? And the answer is you basically switch it on, and that's where you get into the functionality and the settings. There's a menu button here, and it shows you the battery level. And this is what the setting is set at iOS at the moment, and that's a special setting where it doesn't drain power. And you have a max setting, which will draw more power from the high power ports from a Mac, a USB 3 and USB 2 for PC, and Android for Android. So depending which setting you put it on, it'll draw power appropriately. And that means, once it's set up, it will work for whatever device you have as necessary. So when it powers on, if I don't touch it for about 10 seconds, it powers off. So if I just go through the options again, because they're not all available if I use USB input, the other options available in the settings, I have to flick through them quickly because it shuts off quickly. Charging you can manually set to be off or on, or automatic, which is when music isn't playing. There's an internal MSATA drive. You can enable or disable that. The optical port can be enabled or disabled, which is necessary if you want to use optical input. And there are dimming options if you want the display to be a bit darker. And there's the firmware version. A long press of the menu button will give another set of options. One is the PCM filter, which is built into the Sabre DAC that's inside. The next option is the DSD filter, of which there are 3 as well, or 4 I should say, considering it starts at 0. And variable or fixed line output. And it will not let me do this with something plugged in, otherwise I might blow something up. You can have 5 volts full power, which is a lot for an output. The normal output is 2 volts. So for someone who has like a passive volume control going direct to a power amp, 5 volts might be a bit better. And variable, which is normal. And you can see the volume controls light up to indicate the power as I do that. That's it for the settings. But once it's all set up, all you really have to do is basically plug everything and go. The battery charging time is about 4 hours, or 3 or 4 hours, depending on the device plugged into, because they were originally going to make it 2 hours, but to preserve the battery life, they made it 3 or 4. So with the sound of the Flow, there are a few aspects to that. The first is the headphone amp, and as you see the headphone amp here, if I try and turn the volume up and not drop everything, it won't allow me to do so without anything plugged in. Now the volume control, once I plug something in, starts at minus 90 dBs and goes up, or you can go down if you have very sensitive, extremely sensitive IEMs. And the digital volume, it's a digital volume control, so there's absolutely no noise. Although I don't have any super sensitive IEMs, it was completely silent with the custom IEMs I have from JH Audio. Now, of course, then you can go all the way up to minus 0 dBs, but as soon as you pull the headphones out, it resets back to minus 90 dBs. With the amp itself, it works really well with IEMs all the way up to full-size headphones. It just had all the dynamics and punch and body that I needed with whatever I was using basically, and with a low output impedance, it doesn't matter what that is. So in that regard, the Flow is fantastic. You don't need an external amp to get the most out of it. The DAC, on the other hand, is a bit more interesting. Because it's a Sabre DAC, an ES9018 K2M, it comes with, I don't know if you're familiar with filters on DACs, but if you're not, there's something you might want to research or not, but you'll probably hear it thrown around. The chips inside have various filters for the sound output for oversampling, and there are, this of course, if you go through the menu system, you press the menu button for a long time, you can go through and switch the filters, PCM filters, manually yourself. The DSD filters probably won't make much difference because they affect only things out beyond your hearing range and will how fast the ultrasonic noise gets cut off. But switching them, there isn't a heck of a lot of difference, even if I listen, kind of A-B it, or just listen to a whole song and listen to the whole song again with a different filter. But what can make a difference, and this is why I've set the display to 348 kilohertz, is even though there's no 348 kilohertz music out there, unless it's something off a DXD capable analog to digital converter in a studio, what you can do is if you have software in your computer which has isotope or something high quality built in, such as Audivana Plus, you can have the Audivana Plus settings maxed out to tend to set it sampling 2 times, 4 times, 8 times up to 352.8 or 384 kilohertz. And the sound quality then improves quite a bit over the default, especially with instruments, which tend to sound a little bit flat and a little bit glary out of Sabre chips. And in that way, the Hugo's still better, even if I do try and max it out that way. But all the same, you can get pretty close doing that. The second way you can get close is, if you do that with something like a cheap USB cable like this, you do tend to get dropouts a bit because these things, are not so good with noise, and computers are not so good with noise either. I tend to use a shit audio Weird, which is a USB noise isolator, to avoid that. That meant I could leave it plugged into my computer and get very good sound, very good results, and enough that I didn't miss the Hugo as much if I didn't listen critically. On the other end of the scale, I compared it to my Centrance Hi-Fi M8. And I did that first when I first listened to it, before I knew even what was inside this, and later on when I got back home and I got my own to compare it with. The M8 is one of my favorite sounding portable or transportable DAC amps. The Flow, basically there's more detail, more resolution, more got deeper into the music than the M8 did. This leaves the Flow sitting, in my mind, nicely between the M8 and the Hugo, although I'd say the amp on this is better than that one on the Hugo for preference, except with IEMs where I'm fine with the Hugo and IEMs. Not that I'm not fine with the Hugo with full-size headphones, it's just that it worked better with an external amp. So if you watch some of my other reviews, you may have heard me say this before. If you've never heard anything this good, the features appeal to you because you can put an M-SATA drive in there if you don't, or you can order it with one, store all your music on there and take it with you with an Android device. In iOS devices can't read external drives, but something like a small computer. I have a MacBook Air. It's perfect for that. And especially with, it could be Onkyo HD player on your iPhone if you want to, or something similar on Android, which has reasonably good quality upsampling. You can get really, really good results with it, and I think you'll really like it. If you've heard something, if you've already heard really excellent DACs, you may find it sounding, a tiny bit flat and less musical relative to a really good high-end DAC. Obviously, it depends what you're used to. But I think it's certainly a unique, it's good. Transportable unit. Of course, having sort of sharp edges and it's not super portable. It's the kind of thing you might sit in Starbucks and listen to custom IEMs with, which is what a friend of mine does already. And for that, I think it's great, or some good closed-back headphones. And at home, leave it under computer, plug it in. You don't have to worry about charging, switching on and off settings and all. You just have to set it up once, really. And it could be good, on an office desk or whatever. It's small, compact in that regard, and it has simple and straightforward functionality. So I really like this. One of my best listening devices I've had to date, and it could really readily replace a big, hot and heavy rack full of gear. Actually, the table this is sitting on used to have a whole rack full of hot, heavy gear, which I used to listen with, and I don't need to anymore because I've got devices such as this and the Hugo. Thanks for watching the video. Before you go, did you know that my videos are entirely supported by people like you? For the equivalent of buying me a coffee once in a while, you'll get to see the rough cuts in advance. You can also interact with me on chat or email me for advice, or generally interact with the little community we have going of Patreon supporters. Head over to patreon.com/Currawong for more information. Also, there'll be written reviews of this product on my website, which you can access easily at here.reviews. And if you don't want to sign up to be a patron, you can also support my videos by buying your headphones through the links on the sidebar. And in doing so, you'll help support independent reviews. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you online.